The brain's a pattern-seeking device, and my brain might be old and worn out, but I still see some patterns when it comes to foreign countries, foreign companies, just entities outside the control of the U.S. that are coming in and controlling some of our fisheries in such a way that might either directly or indirectly inhibit our ability to harvest our own food. So that's why I'm talking about this, and what I want to talk about is the Menhaden situation over on the eastern seaboard. Now, the Menhaden is a type of bait fish, forage fish, that is super important to the ecology all up and down the eastern seaboard, from say like Chesapeake Bay down to the Louisiana Gulf Coast and the Gulf of the mouth of the Mississippi and so forth. It's vital to the whole ecosystem. It's one of those major parts of the food chain. And if you're, go to the Gulf Coast, go redfish fishing, for example, it's the Menhaden migrations that you're kind of following with that. They don't always feed on Menhaden, but when they're around, that's what they're feeding on. And the thing about Menhaden is that they're very valuable commercially. So if you get out a chance to go out and do some redfish fishing, which I suggest you do if you never had a chance to do that. But redfish, when they, we're talking about big bull redfish, 20, 30, 40 pounds, bigger. They get hold of a Menhaden, which might be about that big, they crush it, they don't swallow it whole. So you get a school of big fish feeding on Menhaden. What you'll get out there in the Gulf is a oil slick. So you look for the oil slicks and you cast to them, and that's how you get those big bullfish, or redfish a lot of times. So the Menhaden are very oily and lots of protein. That's what makes them valuable commercially. So there's a lot of talk lately about how the Menhaden are being overfished commercially. And biologists, fisheries researchers, everybody's like just real concerned about what's going on with how many pounds of Menhaden are being caught every year. It's an enormous amount. So what's going on there? Well, there's one particular company in Virginia where pretty much all of the Menhaden are going to, and that up there anyway. And that's a factory called Omega Protein. Omega Protein is a Menhaden processing facility where they produce, well, nutritional supplements. Like you go to the store and you buy the fish oils and so forth. Or, I don't know much about that, but nutritional supplements that people buy. And also lots of it goes to dog food, different animal foods, and also fish food for commercial fish farms. Now, using Menhaden for this sort of thing is nothing new. Omega Protein is a company that, under different names and different company structures, goes back all the way to 1878. So this industry's been around a long time. The Menhaden were extremely valuable to the colonists for fertilizer and food and everything else, along with the American shad. Without American shad and Menhaden, we probably wouldn't be here as a country. That's a whole other story, but it's a true story. And then, of course, the Native Americans relied on Menhaden as well. So the value of Menhaden is nothing new. Okay, who owns Omega Protein? Okay, now the ships that go out and are harvesting the Menhaden to take to the processing facility, those are American owned. But who owns Omega Protein? Well, it turns out it's a company called Cook Incorporated that was started back in 1985 by a gentleman, Gifford Cook, and his two sons up in New Brunswick, which is part of Canada. It's just on the other side of Maine. So Cook Incorporated is a Canadian company. And it's an interesting and impressive story about how this company got going. Well, they started just, Gifford and his two sons with one net pen. They were fish farming, Atlantic salmon. And they had one net pen, 5,000 fish, and I guess they did okay with it, but they figured out right away that in order to really do well, they needed to have their own supply of eggs and smolt, so they wouldn't have to buy that. So they bought a hatchery close by, the Oak Bay Hatchery, and produced their own eggs and smolt. So it's a smart business move. Well, since 1985, they've grown into the largest privately owned seafood company in the world. with over $4 billion in sales. Now it's Canadian dollars because this is a Canadian company. So they've got fish farming operations in 15 different countries, 30 different processing plants, and have 800 ships supplying them with the raw materials like Menhaden. So this is a big company now, very successful. So they took over Omega Protein back in 2017, and since then have really established themselves as the commercial harvesters of Menhaden on the East Coast. So how does a Canadian company corner the market and almost monopolize the entire industry there? And I don't know. I'm sure it's an interesting story. But one thing that they had to get around was the Jones Act of 1920, which says that if you're transporting goods on a ship between any U.S. ports, those ships have to be U.S. owned. And back in 1920, right after World War I, it was considered a national security thing. And it's always been criticized that it raises the cost of shipping, but that's a different story. But so this Canadian company, Cook Incorporated, had to come up with a way to get around that. So they just simply contracted with this company, Ocean Harvesters, that owns all of the ships that they use. And these aren't just independent little guys who own their own boat and go out and try to make a living harvesting fish. You know, it's commercial fishermen like you see all over Louisiana and up and down the coast. But these are big ships. This is the big operation, where they've got spotting planes and the whole deal. I mean, this is big time operation. And they have the ability to catch lots and lots of fish at the same time. These big purse seiners. Huge amounts of fish can be caught at once. Now, there's supposed to be limits on what they can catch and all that. But the issue is like, okay, are we collapsing the Menhaden population and just going to decimate the entire eastern seaboard by taking a big piece of the food chain out? So it's a big problem. There's a lot of talk about that. So my question is, well, how come this Canadian company is able to do that? Now, I don't think it's, nothing about Canada. I mean, any country, what's the difference if it's Canada or anywhere else? So that's the game that's being played there. But the thing is, we don't have to worry, because according to the Omega Protein website, which is owned by Cook Incorporated, they have some statements there from the Gulf State Marine Fishery Commission and the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission that overfishing is not occurring. It's no problem. It's all good. And they have another paragraph there that's saying, our fishing partner at Ocean Harvesters is committed to fishing in a responsible manner, equally respecting the environment in which we operate and the health of the Menhaden population that we harvest. Okay, so it's all good. And Cook Incorporated is operating in a business-friendly environment right now, it would appear, because it's the position of the federal government right now is to open up more commercial fishing. We take away restrictions, open up more water, encourage more commercial fishing, and try to close the $20 billion trade deficit that we have in the fishing products world. So you got to hand it to Cook Incorporated for building one heck of a business, but it remains to be seen how that's going to affect our rights to fish.